The bus rattled down the endless stretch of Texas highway, its headlights carving through the midnight dark like knives. Inside, passengers dozed off against fogged windows, the hum of the engine their lullaby. But for 25-year-old Maya Johnson, sleep was impossible. She sat upright, hands twisting nervously in her lap, eyes darting between her phone screen and the black horizon. She wasn't just traveling to another state. She believed she was traveling into a new life. For 6 months, she had been falling in love with Derek Barnes, a man she met online through a dating app. Their conversations had gone from flirty jokes to long confessions at 2 a.m. He told her about his dreams of starting over, about how he wanted a woman who would stand by him no matter what. Maya, who had always felt overlooked, felt like she had finally been chosen. Every message from him was a spark of light. "I can't wait to hold you, baby. You're the only real one I've ever met. Come here, and I promise you'll never want to leave." Now, with her suitcase stuffed in the overhead bin and her heart hammering in her chest, Maya believed him. She believed this trip was her escape from a small-town life that felt like a cage. Before she left, her mother had pleaded with her. Maya could still hear the tremble in her mom's voice. "Are you sure about this, baby? People online, they can pretend to be anyone." Maya had smiled, forcing a confidence she only half felt. "I know, Mom. But Derek's different. He listens to me. He makes me feel seen." Her mother had shaken her head, eyes glassy with worry. "You've always been chasing love like it's the air you breathe. Just be careful, please." But Maya had kissed her mom's cheek, promising she'd be fine. After all, wasn't love worth the risk? The bus hissed to a stop at the Houston terminal at dawn. Maya stepped off, tugging her jacket tighter around her shoulders. The air smelled of gasoline and fried food from a nearby diner. And there he was, Derek, standing at the curb in a worn leather jacket, tall and broad-shouldered, flashing the kind of smile that could melt defenses. "Maya," he said, his voice deep and rough, before pulling her into his arms. For a moment, all the warnings faded. She felt small and safe against his chest. The first hours together were everything she had dreamed. He carried her suitcase to his old pickup truck, joking that now she was in real Texas territory. They stopped for breakfast tacos, where he watched her eat with an intensity that made her blush. Back at his apartment, a cramped second-floor unit in a weather-stained brick complex, Derek apologized for the mess. "I've been waiting on you to make it feel like home," he said, sweeping empty beer bottles off the counter. Maya laughed, brushing it off. She wasn't looking for perfection. She was looking for belonging. That night, he took her to a barbecue joint that smelled of hickory smoke and spilled beer. Neon signs buzzed overhead as a jukebox crooned old country love songs. Derek draped his arm around her shoulder, introducing her to the bartender as "my girl." "My girl," she repeated in her head, savoring the sound. Over ribs and cornbread, they talked about the future. Derek told her he wanted to leave behind his mistakes, that meeting her was a sign he could change. "You're the reason I wake up in the morning," he said, his eyes burning into hers. "Stay here with me. Don't go back." Her chest swelled with hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of forever. Still, little things tugged at her attention. His apartment walls were bare, no photographs of family or friends. The closet was nearly empty, like he had only recently moved in, or was always ready to leave. The door's lock looked new, the metal too shiny against the worn wood frame. When she asked about his past, he brushed it aside. "I'll tell you everything soon. Just not tonight." Maya felt the sting of unease, but she told herself she was overthinking. Everyone had secrets. Everyone needed time. By the time they returned to the apartment, she was tired but glowing. She curled up on the couch beside him, letting herself believe she was finally safe, finally loved. Derek kissed her forehead and whispered, "You belong here with me. Forever." Maya closed her eyes, not knowing that in less than 14 hours, her dream would twist into the kind of nightmare her mother had feared all along. Maya awoke the next morning to the smell of coffee drifting through the small apartment. For a brief second, she forgot where she was. Then she saw Derek standing at the stove, shirtless, frying bacon in a skillet that hissed with grease. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said, flashing her a smile that felt like sunlight after a storm. Maya smiled back, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. The apartment might have been bare, but in that moment, it felt like home. Derek slid a plate across the counter, bacon and eggs steaming. First breakfast in Texas. You better get used to it. She laughed, taking a bite. The food was simple, but the way he watched her made it feel like a five-star meal. He leaned on the counter, his eyes never leaving hers. You look good here, he murmured. Like you belong. Maya felt a flush creep up her neck. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe this could be the place where she finally fit. Later that afternoon, Derek took her out again. They drove with the windows down, the humid Houston air whipping through her hair. He cranked up old-school R&B, tapping the steering wheel as he sang along. Maya laughed, letting the music soak into her bones. He brought her to a barbecue joint tucked between a pawn shop and a laundromat. The neon sign buzzed faintly as they walked inside. The air was thick with smoke and the tang of barbecue sauce. Locals crowded the tables, boots tapping against the scuffed floorboards. This is real Texas, Derek said proudly, sliding into a booth. Over plates piled with brisket and cornbread, the conversation flowed easily. He told her about his love for music, about wanting to start fresh. He spoke like a man carrying invisible weight, yet determined to shed it. I'm done with the past, he said, stabbing a fork into his food. What matters is right now. What matters is you. Maya felt a swell of pride. For once, she wasn't someone's afterthought. She was the center of a man's world. But small shadows flickered at the edges of her joy. When she asked about his family, he shrugged. We don't talk. Haven't in years. His voice clipped, his jaw tightening as though daring her to press further. Everyone's got baggage, she said softly, hoping to ease the tension. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. You're different, Maya. You don't judge me. That's why I need you here. His words were sweet, but beneath them, she felt a subtle urgency, like he wasn't just asking, he was insisting. Back at the apartment, the evening stretched out like honey, slow and golden. Derek put on music and pulled her into a clumsy dance in the living room. She laughed as he spun her around, nearly knocking into the coffee table. For the first time in years, she felt carefree. Stay here with me, he whispered against her ear. Don't even think about leaving. Her heart skipped. It was flattering, intoxicating even. Yet a tiny voice whispered inside her. Why so fast? Why so desperate? She brushed it aside, leaning into the warmth of his chest. Love wasn't supposed to make sense. It was supposed to sweep you off your feet. That night, when they settled onto the couch, Maya noticed again how empty the apartment was. No framed photos. No books. Just bare walls and a couch that smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. Don't you have any pictures? She asked lightly. Derek stiffened. Pictures of what? Family, friends, old memories. He shook his head, eyes fixed on the floor. Memories just weigh you down. The words sent a shiver through her, though she forced a smile. I guess you're right. He looked up suddenly, his gaze sharp. Promise me you're not going to leave, Maya. I need to hear you say it. She hesitated, the air between them heavy. Then, not wanting to break the fragile peace, she whispered, I'm not going anywhere. Derek's face softened instantly. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. That's all I need to hear, he said. Maya lay in his arms, trying to ignore the unease curling in her stomach. She had come all this way to find love, to build something real. But as the night deepened, so did the feeling that Derek was holding on to her a little too tightly, as if letting go was never an option. Maya lay awake long after Derek's breathing settled into a steady rhythm beside her. The room was dark except for a sliver of neon light leaking through the blinds, painting faint red lines across the ceiling. She stared at them, her mind restless. She should have felt safe. After all, she was in the arms of the man who had told her again and again that she was his whole world. And yet, the way he gripped her waist, even in sleep, felt less like tenderness and more like a lock. She shifted slightly, but his arm tightened reflexively, as if even unconscious he feared she might slip away. Her thoughts wandered to her mother's voice on the phone 2 nights before, the tremor of worry she had tried to ignore. People online can pretend to be anyone. At the time, Maya had laughed it off, choosing to believe in love rather than fear. Now, in the stillness of this Houston apartment, the words echoed like a prophecy. She tried to push away the doubts. She reminded herself of Derek's smile at the bus station, the way he had watched her eat tacos like she was the only woman alive. That was real, wasn't it? It had to be. She had invested too much of her heart, Too many hours of whispered late-night calls to believe otherwise. And yet, the apartment walls were bare. His stories about his past were vague, shifting like sand. When she had asked simple questions about family, childhood, friends, he had closed up as though she had pressed against a bruise. Was that normal? Or was it the first sign that she had built her love on a foundation of shadows? She turned carefully, looking at him in the dim light. His face, relaxed in sleep, seemed softer, almost boyish. Vulnerable even. For a fleeting second, her chest ached with sympathy. Maybe he was just broken, lonely, desperate for someone to stay. And hadn't she always prided herself on being the one who could heal others? But then, as if on cue, his grip tightened again, holding her close with a force that erased tenderness. It was not a lover's embrace. It was a warning. Don't leave. Her throat tightened. She thought of her suitcase by the door, not yet unpacked. It suddenly felt less like the start of a life, and more like a lifeline, a reminder that she still had a way back. A tear slid down her cheek as she whispered silently into the dark, words he could never hear. Please, don't make me regret this. She closed her eyes, praying morning would bring clarity, praying the unease gnawing at her stomach was only nerves and not something darker. But deep down, some quiet part of her already knew. She had stepped into something she didn't fully understand. And once inside, it might already be too late to step back out. And somewhere in the silence between them, the first cracks began to form. The next evening, the apartment felt smaller than ever. Outside, Houston buzzed with weekend energy, traffic horns, laughter spilling from bars. But inside Derek's one-bedroom unit, the air was heavy, still. The blinds were drawn tight, shutting out the world. Maya sat on the couch, twisting the edge of her sweater in her fingers. Derek had put on music, low and pulsing, but it only made the silence between them more noticeable. She tried to relax, reminding herself that new love always came with nerves. But unease coiled in her stomach like a warning she didn't want to hear. Derek emerged from the bathroom, fresh from a shower, his hair damp, wearing only sweatpants. He dropped down beside her, his presence filling the small space. You're quiet, he said, searching her face. Just tired, Maya lied. He draped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her against him. Good. Then let's stay in. Just us. There was something in his tone, a need, almost a command. Maya nodded, trying to convince herself this was what she wanted. Later, as the night deepened, Derek leaned in and kissed her. His lips were urgent, hungry, as if he were trying to erase the distance her silence had created. At first, Maya responded, letting herself melt into the warmth. But then she felt something off, something that didn't match the image she had of the man she thought she knew. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat as she pulled back, eyes wide. Derek, her voice cracked. What is this? What's going on? His jaw tightened. Don't. What do you mean don't? Her voice was trembling now, fear rising. Don't ruin this, he snapped, his tone sharp enough to cut the air. You came all this way for me. For us. Isn't that what you wanted? Maya's chest heaved. I came here because I trusted you. Because I thought I knew who you were. You do know me, he said quickly, almost desperately. I'm the man who loves you. The man who would do anything to keep you. She shook her head, tears forming. No, Derek, you've been lying. From the beginning. Tell me the truth. For a long moment, the apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Derek's hands curled into fists. His eyes burned with a mixture of shame and fury. You don't understand, he said finally, his voice low and strained. You think you want the truth, but you don't. The truth ruins everything. I deserve to know, Maya whispered, her voice breaking. If you ever cared about me, just tell me who you really are. His face twisted. I told you already. I'm yours. That's all that matters. Maya stood up, her knees shaking. She grabbed her purse from the table, fumbling with the zipper. No, that's not enough. I can't stay here. Not like this. In 2 strides, Derek was in front of the door, blocking her way. His tall frame loomed over her, his chest rising and falling with sharp breaths. You're not leaving, he said flatly. Her heart pounded. Move, Derek. His voice cracked with anger. You don't get it. I can't let you walk out. If you leave, I lose everything. And I've already lost too much. The tension in the room thickened until it felt like the walls themselves were closing in. Maya's tears spilled over, hot against her cheeks. I just want the truth, she cried. Why is that so hard? For a second, something human flickered in Derek's eyes. Fear, vulnerability. But then it vanished, replaced by a cold determination. Because the truth will make you hate me, he said bitterly. And I can't let that happen. I'd rather keep you here by force than watch you walk away in disgust. Maya stumbled back, clutching her purse against her chest like a shield. That's not love, Derek. That's control. He slammed his hand against the wall, the sound making her flinch. It's love when you're all I have, he shouted. The night dragged on like an endless storm. Maya tried everything, pleading, reasoning, even moments of silence, hoping he would calm down. But Derek circled her like a predator guarding prey, never letting her near the door. At one point, she reached for her phone. His hand shot out, snatching it from her grip. He tossed it onto the counter, out of reach. You don't need that, he said coldly. You don't need anyone but me. Maya's body trembled with terror. This was not the man she thought she had traveled for. This was someone darker, someone dangerous. Still, a part of her clung to the hope that maybe, if she just spoke the right words, she could save herself. She wiped her tears and forced her voice to steady. Derek, if you love me, then let me go. You can't build something real out of lies. His expression hardened, eyes narrowing like steel. You're not going anywhere. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not ever. The clock ticked past midnight. Outside, the city was alive, but inside that apartment, Maya felt trapped in a cage she hadn't seen until the bars closed around her. Every breath felt like a countdown. Every second carried the weight of danger. And deep down, she knew. The man she had thought would be her salvation was, in fact, the one who might destroy her. By the time the clock hit noon the next day, Maya had been inside Derek's apartment for almost 14 hours. 14 hours that felt like a lifetime. The sun beat down outside, pouring light through the cracks in the blinds, but inside, the room was dim, suffocating. The smell of stale cigarettes and sweat clung to the air. Empty beer cans lay scattered on the counter from Derek's restless pacing through the night. Maya sat on the edge of the couch, her suitcase at her feet. She had packed in silence while Derek watched, his arms folded across his chest, eyes unblinking. I'm leaving, she said finally, her voice soft but firm. Derek shook his head slowly, like she was a child refusing to eat her dinner. You're not. I am, she replied, clutching the handle of her suitcase. This isn't what I thought it would be. I can't stay here. His lips pressed into a hard line. He stepped closer, towering over her. You think you can just walk out? After everything we talked about? After everything I gave you? Maya's heart hammered. What you gave me was a lie, she whispered. You tricked me, Derek. You hid who you really are. And I can't live with that. The words sliced through the silence like a blade. Derek's face twisted, anger flooding his features. You don't know what you're saying, he spat. You don't understand what it cost me to let you in. I showed you more of myself than I've ever shown anyone. Maya stood, suitcase in hand. And it wasn't enough. Because it wasn't the truth. For a moment, she thought he might step aside. His shoulders sagged, and his eyes flickered with something. Shame, maybe even fear. But then his jaw tightened again, and the storm returned. You're not leaving me, he growled. The argument exploded, bouncing off the walls of the cramped apartment. Let me go, Maya cried, yanking at the door handle. No. Derek slammed it shut again with the weight of his body. You walk out that door, and I'm nothing. Do you get that? Nothing. You're already nothing if you have to trap someone to love you, she screamed back, tears streaming down her face. Her words cut deep. His chest heaved as if the air itself had betrayed him. Say that again, he hissed, his eyes narrowing to slits. Maya shook her head, backing away. I don't want to fight. I just want to go home. But Derek wasn't hearing her anymore. His rage had drowned out reason. The neighbors would later tell police they heard the crash of furniture, the sound of something heavy slamming against the wall, followed by a woman's voice pleading. Stop. Please stop. Inside, Maya stumbled backward as Derek's arms swept across the coffee table, sending a lamp shattering to the floor. She grabbed her phone from the counter, dialing with shaking fingers. But Derek lunged, knocking it from her hand. You think you can call someone? You think anyone cares about you more than I do? His voice was wild, unrecognizable. Maya backed into the corner, hands trembling, tears blurring her vision. This isn't love, Derek. This is a cage. He stepped closer, his fists clenched, veins bulging in his neck. "I told you. I'd rather keep you here forever than watch you walk away." "Then you'll have to kill me," Maya whispered. The words hung in the air like a challenge, like a prophecy neither of them could escape. What happened next unfolded in a blur of violence and despair. Derek lunged, pinning her to the wall. Maya fought back with everything she had, scratching, kicking, screaming. The sound of her cries echoed through the thin walls of the building. "Help me!" she screamed, her voice breaking. "Somebody help me!" A neighbor paused outside in the hallway, frozen, torn between knocking on the door and calling 911. By the time she reached for her phone, the apartment had gone deathly quiet. Inside, Maya's body went limp in Derek's arms. His chest heaved, sweat dripping down his temples, his eyes wide with horror at what he had done. He lowered her gently to the floor, brushing the hair from her face as if tenderness could undo the brutality of the last moments. "Maya," he whispered hoarsely, shaking her shoulders. "Wake up. Please, wake up." But there was no answer. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in hours, Derek realized the enormity of what he had done. He sat back on his heels, his hands trembling, staring at the lifeless woman who had once looked at him with hope in her eyes. It hadn't been supposed to end like this. He had wanted her to stay, to belong, to fill the empty spaces inside him. But instead, he had destroyed the only person who had believed in him. For a fleeting second, regret pierced his rage. But then fear took over. He staggered to his feet, pacing the apartment, muttering under his breath. "I didn't mean to. She made me. She was going to leave me. She left me no choice." The rationalizations came fast, each one more desperate than the last. He yanked the blinds shut tighter, stuffed her phone into his pocket, and grabbed a duffel bag from under the bed. He moved quickly, frantically, shoving clothes and cash inside. He couldn't stay. He couldn't face what he had done. As he slammed the door behind him and disappeared into the Texas heat, Maya's body lay still on the floor, the suitcase she had packed only hours earlier still waiting by the door. The fatal hours had passed. What began as a journey of hope had twisted into a nightmare of control, lies, and violence. And now, with Maya gone and Derek on the run, the true story was only beginning. One that would unravel through neighbors' testimonies, police reports, and a trial that would expose not just a murder, but the secrets that had led to it. The apartment building was quiet again, the chaos of the afternoon sealed behind thin walls. But silence rarely lasts long in a neighborhood where everyone hears everything. At 3:17 p.m., a neighbor named Mrs. Henderson, a retired schoolteacher who lived down the hall, called 911. Her voice shook as she told the dispatcher, "There's been screaming, crashing, and now it's quiet. Too quiet. Something's wrong in there." Minutes later, the wail of sirens cut through the heavy Houston heat. 2 patrol cars pulled into the cracked asphalt parking lot, lights flashing red and blue across the faded brick walls. Officers rushed up the narrow staircase, radios crackling. When they reached Derek's apartment, the door was unlocked. The officers exchanged a look, caution mixing with dread, before pushing it open. The scene inside froze them in their tracks. The blinds were drawn, casting the room in shadows. Beer cans and broken glass littered the floor. The air was heavy, stale, and carried the unmistakable metallic tang of blood and violence. And there, on the floor near the couch, lay Maya Johnson. One officer knelt beside her, fingers searching desperately for a pulse. He shook his head slowly, his face pale. "She's gone." The other officer exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. "Jesus Christ, she can't be more than 25. They moved quickly, securing the scene, calling in detectives. But for a long moment, both men just stood there, staring at the still body of a young woman who had once believed she was beginning her forever. By the time Detective Lisa Carter arrived, the building had drawn a crowd. Neighbors huddled in the hallway, whispering, their faces a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. Yellow police tape stretched across the door as crime scene techs snapped photos, gloved hands carefully bagging evidence. Lisa stepped inside, her eyes scanning every detail. She was a seasoned investigator, 45, sharp-eyed, known for her steady composure. But even she paused when she saw Maya. She didn't stand a chance, Lisa murmured under her breath, kneeling beside the body. Nearby, Maya's suitcase still sat by the door, packed and ready to leave. That single detail pierced through Lisa's professional armor. It told the story clearer than words. Maya had tried to escape and never made it. Detectives canvassed the building, knocking on doors, recording witness statements. Mrs. Henderson, her voice trembling, said, "I heard her screaming. Please, stop. I should have called sooner. Maybe I could have saved her." Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched her robe tighter around her frail frame. Another neighbor described hearing a man's voice shouting, followed by a crash, then silence. "He was always a little strange," the neighbor muttered. Kept to himself. "But I didn't think he was capable of this." All the signs pointed to one man, Derek Barnes. But he was gone. While the investigation unfolded in Houston, hundreds of miles away, Maya's mother was washing dishes in her small kitchen when her phone rang. She answered with a smile, expecting to hear her daughter's voice. Instead, it was Detective Carter. "Ma'am," Lisa began gently, "I'm afraid I have some difficult news." What followed was the kind of conversation no parent ever forgets. The words falling heavy, surreal, final. At first, Maya's mother didn't understand. "No, that's impossible. I just spoke to her yesterday. She was safe. She was happy." Lisa's voice was steady but kind. "I'm so sorry. Your daughter was found in Houston this afternoon. She didn't survive." The dish slipped from her mother's hand, shattering in the sink. She gripped the counter, the world spinning, her chest hollowing out with grief so sharp it felt like a blade. On the other end of the line, Lisa added, "We're going to find the man responsible. I promise you that." But those words, though well-meant, could not fill the silence that followed. The silence of a mother realizing her child's voice would never echo through the house again. Back in Houston, the coroner's team carefully carried Maya's body out of the apartment, the black bag zipping shut with a sound that made even the officers avert their eyes. Neighbors watched in hushed silence. Some crossed themselves. Others turned away, unable to stomach the sight. Detective Carter stood at the doorway, jaw tight, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just another case. This was a young woman who had believed in love, who had traveled across state lines for a future she thought was waiting. Now, it was her job to make sure Maya's story wasn't buried with her. Detective Lisa Carter stood in the apartment long after Maya's body had been taken away, letting the silence speak to her. The suitcase by the door, the shattered lamp on the floor, the scattered beer cans. Each detail told a story of desperation and violence. She scribbled in her notepad, her lips pressed into a thin line. Derek Barnes had vanished, but she knew his ghost still lingered here in every overturned chair and every broken promise. The first step was simple: find Derek. Officers were already running his name through databases, and what came back painted a picture darker than Lisa had expected. He had a record, not enough to land him in prison, but enough to reveal patterns. Disorderly conduct, bar fights, restraining orders filed by old girlfriends. Each charge had somehow been dropped or reduced, but the trail was there. And it told Lisa one thing. Maya wasn't his first victim of rage, just the first who didn't survive it. She sat with the neighbors, taking statements. Mrs. Henderson wrung her hands as she spoke. "I heard her scream, Detective." She begged him to stop. Then it went quiet. "I should have called sooner." Tears filled her eyes, but Lisa put a hand on her shoulder. "You did what you could. We'll handle the rest." Another neighbor, a young man with tattoos creeping up his neck, recalled seeing Derek leave in a hurry, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't even look back, just jumped into that beat-up pickup and peeled out. Lisa's mind turned the pieces like a puzzle. A man on the run, volatile, desperate, dangerous to anyone who got in his way. The search stretched into the night. Patrol cars combed the streets, stopping at gas stations, motels, diners. Photos of Derek circulated through the precinct and onto the news. His face flashed on local television, wanted for questioning in the death of Maya Johnson. Back at the station, Lisa studied his file under the fluorescent lights. It read like a man who had been drifting, never staying in one place long, reinventing himself with every new town. Jobs that lasted months at best, addresses that shifted across 3 states, and a trail of women who all seemed to disappear from his life with nothing but bruised hearts and whispered warnings. One ex-girlfriend, tracked down in Louisiana, agreed to speak with detectives. On the phone, her voice was brittle. He was charming at first, said all the right things, But when I tried to leave, he snapped. He locked me in once, wouldn't let me go for hours. I got away, but I never looked back. If your girl tried to leave him. Her words trailed off, heavy with implication. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, her jaw tight. It was the same story, only this time the ending was irreversible. 2 days after Maya's body was discovered, a tip came in from a truck stop 2 counties over. A clerk recognized Derek's photo, said he'd been there late at night, jittery, paying cash for food and gas. He was alone, restless, and in a hurry. Lisa assembled a task force. He's running scared, but he's not careful. He'll slip. We just need to be ready when he does. As the manhunt intensified, Lisa found herself thinking about Maya's family. She called her mother every day, offering updates even when there wasn't much to give. Each time, the woman's voice cracked with grief. I told her to be careful. I told her. She whispered, as though the guilt was her own. She wanted to believe in love, Lisa said gently. That's not a crime. The crime belongs to him. The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Days blurred together with leads, false sightings, and long hours. Then, one evening, an officer knocked on Lisa's office door with a folder in hand. We got a hit on his truck, abandoned behind a warehouse near the edge of town. Lisa rose to her feet immediately. Get forensics there. If he ditched the truck, he's on foot. He's desperate. At the warehouse, the pickup sat crooked, the driver's side door ajar. Inside, detectives found the duffel bag, half empty, and scraps of paper, receipts, torn letters, fragments of a life unraveling. On the passenger seat lay Maya's phone, wiped down but still buzzing with missed calls from her mother. Lisa picked it up with gloved hands, her throat tightening. He took everything from her, and he left her phone like it was nothing, she muttered. We'll make sure he doesn't run any farther. A search of the surrounding area began at dawn. Officers with dogs swept through alleys and overgrown lots. Hours later, a deputy spotted him, Derek Barnes, stumbling near the edge of a field, dirty, exhausted, his eyes wild. When he saw the flashing lights, he tried to run, but the chase was brief. He was tackled to the ground, handcuffs snapping shut around his wrists as he thrashed and cursed. You don't understand, he screamed as officers hauled him up. She was going to leave me. She made me do it. Lisa stepped forward, her gaze like steel. No, Derek. You made that choice. His eyes darted wildly, searching for someone to believe his story, but all he saw were cold stares. For once, his charm and excuses bought him nothing. As they shoved him into the back of the squad car, Lisa stood watching, her heart heavy but resolute. Maya's journey had ended in tragedy, but now, at least, her story would not be silenced. Derek would face the consequences, not just for the hours that stole Maya's life, but for every lie, every manipulation, every act of violence that had led here. For Lisa, it was never just about closing a case. It was about giving voice to the woman who had lost hers. And as the squad car pulled away, sirens cutting through the Texas night, she vowed that when Maya's story reached the courtroom, it would be told in full. Every secret, every scream, every fatal hour. The courthouse was packed on the morning of Derek Barnes's trial. Reporters crowded the steps, their cameras flashing as officers escorted him inside in shackles. His face was thinner now, hollowed by months in county lockup, but he still carried that defiance in his eyes. Every flashbulb seemed to feed it. Inside, the air was tense with anticipation. Spectators filled every bench, some there for justice, others for the spectacle of a case that had gripped Texas. Maya's family sat in the front row, her mother clutching a folded photo of her daughter. Her hands trembled, but her chin was high. She wanted Derek to see her strength, not her grief. When the bailiff called the court to order, the room fell silent. Judge Hannah Whitmore, stern in her black robe, presided with the gravity of someone who had seen too many lives broken in her courtroom. State versus Derek Barnes, she said, her voice echoing against the wood-paneled walls. The prosecution rose first. Assistant District Attorney Mark Ellis, a tall man with sharp features, stepped before the jury. His voice was calm, deliberate, carrying the weight of evidence and tragedy. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about trust betrayed and a life stolen. Maya Johnson traveled to Texas full of hope. She believed she was meeting the man of her dreams. But within 14 hours of stepping into his apartment, she was dead on the floor, strangled, silenced. Because this man, he pointed directly at Derek, decided that if she wouldn't stay, she couldn't live. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Maya's mother lowered her eyes, her grip on the photo tightening. The defense responded with equal fervor. Derek's lawyer, a seasoned public defender named Carol Jensen, painted a different picture. "My client is not a monster," she told the jury. "He is a deeply troubled man with a history of abandonment and untreated mental illness. This was not premeditated murder. It was a tragic accident in the heat of passion, driven by fear of losing the only person he believed ever truly cared for him." Derek sat stiffly beside her, nodding slightly, his jaw clenched. He looked less like a man racked with guilt and more like one desperate to salvage what little control he had left. The first days were filled with testimony. Crime scene photos flashed on the screen, Maya's suitcase by the door, her phone left behind, the shattered lamp. The jury's faces tightened as they absorbed the grim reality. Forensics experts explained how the bruising on her neck confirmed strangulation. Neighbors testified about the screams, about the chilling silence that followed. Mrs. Henderson, frail but resolute, took the stand. She cried out, "Please stop. I heard her. I'll never forget it." Her voice cracked, and some jurors looked away, their eyes glassy. Then came Maya's mother. When she walked to the stand, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. She clutched the same photo she had held on the first day of trial, her daughter's smile shining from it. "I warned her," she said softly, tears brimming. "I told her to be careful." But she believed in love. She believed people could change. That belief cost her life. She turned her gaze toward Derek, her voice sharpening. "And he took my baby from me. He didn't just kill her. He killed our future, our joy, everything she could have been." Derek shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her eyes. For once, his composure faltered. When the prosecution rested, it was Derek's turn. Against his attorney's advice, he insisted on taking the stand. He wanted the jury to hear his version. "I loved Maya," he said, his voice low but steady. "She was everything to me. But when she said she was leaving, I snapped. I didn't mean to hurt her. I just couldn't let her go." The prosecutor rose for cross-examination. "So you admit you put your hands around her neck?" Derek's eyes flickered. I didn't mean for it to go that far." "Did she beg you to stop?" A pause. His jaw worked, but no words came. "Yes or no, Mr. Barnes?" Finally, he muttered, "Yes." "And you didn't stop, did you?" His silence was answer enough. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Some jurors shook their heads, others scribbled notes. The picture was clear. This was not a momentary lapse. It was control, obsession, violence. Closing arguments were electric. The prosecutor's voice thundered. This wasn't love. This was ownership. He didn't see Maya as a woman with her own choices. He saw her as his possession. And when she tried to leave, he decided she never would. The defense pleaded for leniency, urging the jury to consider Derek's mental state, his unstable past. "He is a broken man," Jensen said. "And while we don't excuse his actions, we ask you to see this not as calculated murder, but as a crime of passion." The jury deliberated for hours, the weight of two lives, the one lost and the one on trial, resting on their verdict. When they finally returned, the courtroom stood still. The foreman's voice was steady. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Derek Barnes, guilty of murder in the first degree." Maya's mother gasped, covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face. She clutched her daughter's photo to her chest, whispering a prayer of thanks. Derek's face drained of color. For the first time, real fear flickered in his eyes. He looked around wildly, as though searching for someone who might undo the words just spoken. But there was no one left to save him. Judge Whitmore's voice rang out. "Mr. Barnes, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel struck, sealing his fate. As officers led him away in chains, he twisted back toward the gallery, his voice cracking. "I loved her. She was mine." But his words fell into the silence of a room that no longer believed him. In the front row, Maya's mother stood, tears streaming but her spine unbent. "She wasn't yours," she whispered. "She was her own. And now, she's free." For the first time since Maya's death, the family felt a measure of justice. It didn't bring her back, but it told the world that her life mattered, that her voice had not been completely silenced. Outside the courthouse, cameras rolled, reporters shouted, but Maya's family ignored it all. They stood together, arms linked, holding her memory close. And in that moment, though grief still weighed heavy, there was also light. The light of a story told, a truth acknowledged, and a justice finally delivered. The courtroom emptied slowly after the sentence was handed down, but for Maya's family, time seemed suspended. They sat in the front row long after the gavel struck, unwilling to move, as though leaving the room would mean letting go of her memory all over again. Her mother held onto the photo of Maya, her thumb brushing over her daughter's smile, the tears still hot on her cheeks. Detective Lisa Carter approached quietly. She had been in the back row during sentencing, her eyes never leaving the family. Now she stood before them, her voice low, almost reverent. "She mattered," Lisa said softly. "Every word, every scream we heard about in that apartment, it mattered. And today, the jury told him so." Maya's mother looked up, her eyes rimmed red. "Justice doesn't bring her back." Lisa nodded. "No, it doesn't. But it means he'll never hurt another woman. And that matters too." The words lingered in the air, offering a fragile comfort. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing like lightning. Headlines were already being typed. Man sentenced to life for killing woman he met online. The case had struck a nerve, feeding into national conversations about dating apps, online deception, and the dangers of ignoring red flags. But for Maya's family, it wasn't about statistics or debates. It was about a young woman who had dreamed too big, trusted too deeply, and paid the ultimate price. That night, back at their modest home, the family gathered around the dining table. The chair where Maya usually sat was empty, but her presence hung in the air, her laughter, her optimism, the way she always believed in people even when she shouldn't have. Her younger brother broke the silence first. "I keep thinking about her last trip. How excited she was. She didn't deserve this. Not for love." Her mother wiped at her eyes. She believed in him. She believed in something good. And he twisted it. "That's what makes me sick." Her aunt, who had flown in for the trial, put her hand over the mother's. "We can't let her story just be about how she died. It has to be about how she lived. About her heart. About her courage." The family nodded. In their grief, a new purpose began to form. To make sure Maya's voice carried farther than the apartment where it was silenced. In the weeks that followed, candlelight vigils were held in Maya's hometown. Friends, co-workers, and strangers gathered, holding flickering flames in paper cups, speaking her name into the night air. One after another, people shared stories of her kindness, her laughter, the way she lit up a room. "She always believed in people," one friend said, "even when they didn't deserve it. That was her gift, and, tragically, her downfall." The vigils were covered by local news, amplifying Maya's story. People across Texas and beyond saw her face on their screens, heard her name in their living rooms. Some wept, others grew angry, and many felt a sobering realization. This could happen to anyone's daughter, anyone's sister, anyone's friend. Meanwhile, inside a prison 200 miles away, Derek Barnes began his life sentence. His bravado in the courtroom had faded. Gone were the smirks and defiance. In his cell, stripped of control, stripped of the illusion of love, he was just another man behind bars, haunted by what he had done. He told anyone who would listen that he never meant to kill her, that it was all a mistake. But even his cellmates weren't convinced. "Man, you don't squeeze someone's throat by mistake," one of them muttered. The truth hung heavy in the air. Derek hadn't just killed Maya. He had chosen ownership over love, control over freedom, violence over vulnerability. For Detective Carter, the case left its own mark. She had worked dozens of homicides in her career, but something about Maya's suitcase by the door stayed with her. It was a symbol of hope, of escape, of a woman trying to reclaim her life in her final moments. At a conference for law enforcement months later, she spoke about the case. "We found her bag packed," she told the audience. She was ready to walk out that door. That's the moment she was most dangerous to him, when she chose herself over his control. And that's when he killed her. Her words echoed in the room, leaving officers and advocates alike with a renewed sense of urgency about domestic violence and coercive control. For Maya's mother, grief became a daily companion. She still caught herself picking up the phone to call her daughter, only to remember she'd never hear her voice again. But she also found strength in speaking out. At a town hall months later, she stood before a crowded auditorium and said, her voice trembling but strong. My daughter didn't die because she was careless. She died because a man couldn't stand the truth. She died because he couldn't live with honesty. If you take anything from her story, let it be this. Teach your daughters to trust their instincts. And teach your sons that love is never control. The room erupted in applause, not out of celebration, but out of solidarity. The seasons turned, and though the ache never left, the family found ways to honor Maya's life. A scholarship fund was created in her name, dedicated to young women pursuing degrees in social work, something Maya herself had once dreamed of. Her photo hung in the local library, her smile preserved as a reminder of the hope she carried. Every anniversary of her death, the family gathered at her favorite spot by the river, releasing flowers into the current. They watched the petals drift away, carried by the water, symbolizing both loss and release. She's free now, her mother whispered one year, tears streaking her cheeks. Free from lies. Free from him. Free to be remembered the way she deserves. The story of Maya Johnson became more than a tragedy. It became a cautionary tale, a plea for awareness, a reminder of the thin line between love and obsession. Her life, though cut short, echoed in every conversation sparked, every law discussed, every woman who saw her story and chose to trust her gut. For those who loved her, the pain would never fully heal. But neither would her light ever fully fade. And as her mother had said in that courtroom, the words now etched in memory, she didn't die because of the truth. She died because a man couldn't live with it.